Please be seated. Friends, if you are in 5th, 6th, or 7th grade, this will be your opportunity to go with Rabbi Lefkowitz to do an awesome program downstairs studying about the sweetness of Rosh Hashanah, especially by doing a honey tasting. You'll get to taste all different types of honey. It's going to be very sweet, so go ahead. Can't do this on Yom Kippur, so I might as well take advantage while I can. Have fun, everyone. That is really inspiring. Look at how many 5th, 6th, 7th graders we got here. That's awesome. Well, everyone, Shana Tova. Late one night, in 1946, the legend of Rabbi Isaac Halevi Herzog was born. Rabbi Herzog knocked on the door of an orphanage in Europe in search of Jewish children hidden there during the Second World War with the hopes of bringing them home to the land of Israel. The head of the orphanage answered the door and said, "Rabbi, welcome. I know why you're here. I know that you are in search of Jewish children, but I have a confession to make. I'm so sorry. But when these children were dropped off on our doorstep, we knew why it was being done. And so to protect their lives, what we did was we raised them completely as Christians. We didn't tell the staff. We didn't tell anyone here who they were or what their background was. Not even they knew why they were here. We did it to protect their lives." Rabbi Herzog answered, "I understand completely, and I thank you for protecting them. But please, take me to where they're sleeping. I know how I'll find them." The rabbi walked into a large hall where all of the children of this orphanage were fast asleep, and he softly began to chant, "Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad." Suddenly, children began sitting up in their beds with tears streaming down their faces. Some began to call out, "Mama, Papa." Some jumped out of bed and ran and gave Rabbi Herzog a tremendous hug. The words of the Shema had found their way to a place within these children's hearts that they didn't even know that they had. Last fall, on October 26th, 19 days after the October 7th massacres in Israel, I received an email from Michael Balaban, the president and CEO of the Jewish Federation of Greater Philadelphia. Subject line read, "Rabbinic Solidarity Mission to Israel." He wrote to a small group of clergy in this area, and it said, "Space is limited, it's going to be first come, first serve." And within seconds, I found myself typing on the computer, "I'm in," and I hit send. And when I did, I had this out-of-body experience. I audibly said, I said it out loud to myself, "I can't believe I'm doing this." The next thing I did was call my wife, Rena. "Hey, Rena, I just signed up for this trip to Israel. I can back out at any time, but I have to tell you this is something that I realized I've needed. It's scratching an itch. It's filling a void within me that I didn't even know I had." Without missing a beat, Rena said, "You need to do this." Because she felt it too. We both felt something inside after October 7th that's hard to put into words. This trip was a chance for both of us to act upon that feeling. I would fly to Israel to support the Jewish people and all of the people of Israel there, and Rena would have the equally difficult task of supporting our children here at home as their dad flew into a war zone. I tell you these two stories in succession because I see a link between them. And Jewish tradition has a term for this common thread, the Pinta Yid, which is Yiddish for the Jewish point. The words of the Shema found their way to that Jewish point within each Jewish child in that orphanage. That email from Michael Balaban found its way to my Jewish point within. And I believe that the horrors of October 7th found their way to that point within you as well. What is that point inside that each of us has? Of course, Jewish tradition has a story to help explain it. The ancient rabbis say that when Moses was writing the Torah, he chose one letter Yud and pulled it from the text, and instead of writing it inside the Torah, he placed that letter inside of each Israelite, inside of each of us. The Pintel Yud, the point of the Yud, a letter with God's name within it and within each of us, was later transformed by Yiddish speakers in a play on words into the Pintel Yid instead of the Pintel Yud, the small Jewish point within each of us. That Jewish point has been glowing within me with a white-hot intensity ever since the 7th of October 2023. And I know that no matter how you relate to Judaism, whether you are Jewish or love someone who is, if you're a member of this community, if you are part of us, then that point has been glowing within you as well. I know this because of the way that this community has jumped into action this year. As a community, we raised over $100,000 for our Israel Emergency Aid Fund. 1 month after October 7th, I had the honor of representing our community on that rabbinic solidarity mission that I mentioned earlier. In February, led by Cantor Murley, Rabbi Marks, and our congregation's president, Leslie Weiss, we had 20 of our congregants travel to Israel to volunteer, to donate, and to bear witness. While there have been bright spots amidst these very dark times, I also want to recognize that the Jewish point within us is also what has made us susceptible to so much anger and frustration and sorrow over this past year. Over the course of this year, I have counseled teens in tears over anti-Semitic graffiti scrawled across their bathrooms in school. I've spoken with so many of you who are struggling as we see the daily news out of this country and out of Israel. The hostages, the war, rising anti-Semitism, the horrific attack from Iran just 2 days ago. It is all just so horrible. And I want to let you know that I feel it too. The weight of it all can sometimes be unbearable. Congregation Beth Or was founded just a few months before the State of Israel's 7th birthday. This community has been there over these past 70 years, and yet somehow it feels like right now that this congregation was built for us to meet this very moment, to help us get in touch with our Jewish point within. Now is our time. Now is our time to get in touch with that Jewish point. And this is the place you can come to connect to that point within you in the way that works for you. Shema Yisrael, listen, Israel. We have taken those words to heart this year. Since October 7th, we have hosted 5 survivors of the Hamas attacks in Israel on that fateful day. We have listened to their stories. On October 7th, 2023, Roy Shalev was at the Nova Music Festival. By mid-afternoon, he had been lying in a pool of his own blood for hours, doing everything in his power not to move an inch. He had already been shot in the back by a Hamas terrorist, and his goal was to pretend to be dead until hopefully the Israel Defense Forces would arrive and save him. Roy had kept his eyes shut, his body still, and most importantly for the purposes of this story, he had kept his head facing in one direction for hours. Roy, a former combat soldier in the IDF, had heard nothing for quite some time, and so based on his experience, he had determined it was time to scan the area. So still remaining completely motionless, he decided to deliberately open his eyes as his head was facing one direction and there he saw a clear field, nothing notable. He listened and still heard nothing. And so for the first time in hours, he decided to move, and he slowly, deliberately moved his head from one side to the other. And there, off in the distance, he saw a Hamas terrorist in a green bandana looking in his direction. Did the terrorist see Roy move his head? Or was this murderer in the green Hamas bandana simply gazing off into the distance? Would the terrorist eventually notice Roy's head was now facing in a new direction? In that moment, Roy had to now decide: keep his head facing in a new way, or turn back to its original position. Roy told us that story in June, right here at Beth Or, in that corner of our social hall. As he did, over 300 people were hanging on to every word that Roy said. You could hear a pin drop. We were deeply listening. Roy told us that he made the decision to return his head back to its original position. He had to turn his head all the way back to the other side, knowing full well that it could have led to his death. And so, he described that pivotal moment to us in the following way: I closed my eyes, and as I turned my head, I just kept saying, Shema Yisrael, Shema Yisrael, Shema Yisrael. For my estimation, Roy is not a particularly observant Jew. He doesn't wear a kippah on his head. He was at a music festival, not in synagogue, on October 7th, which was the morning of a Jewish holiday, Simchat Torah. But there is no doubt that deep inside Roy is a Jewish point, a point that inspired Roy to protect the Jewish people in his army service, a point that inspired him to travel all the way to our Jewish community here in Maple Glen to tell his story. And I believe it was from that point within him which the words of the Shema poured forth as he was lying on the ground, injured on the same soil where Jewish people have said those words for thousands of years. Hosting Roy and all of our guests from Israel this year has been one of the most meaningful experiences I've had as a rabbi. I want to take a moment to thank our staff, our lay leaders, volunteers at Beth Or, everyone, all of you, for making it possible to host everyone. This past year, with its unforeseen events, was certainly not the year we would have chosen for such a challenge, because aside from everything that's happening in the world right now, I don't need to tell you that Congregation Beth Or is in a huge moment of transition internally. In just this past year, we have celebrated the incredible accomplishments of our teacher, our Rabbi Emeritus, Rabbi Greg Marks. Hello, Rabbi Marks. He's watching online this morning. We welcomed and installed our awesome assistant rabbi, Rabbi Melissa Lefkowitz. We installed the wonderful cantor Jamie Murley, as she has been here already over a decade in an adjunct role, but now as our full cantor. We welcomed our incredible new executive director, Phil Nordlinger. And next month, on November 22nd, I will be officially installed as your new senior rabbi. We are ready for this change. We are ready thanks to the incredible work of all of the leaders who have built this place. Our clergy emeriti, Rabbi Marks and Cantor Green, our executive director emeritus, Liz Hirsch, our past executive director, Amy Abrams, and all of the staff, lay leaders, past presidents, board members, committee heads, and committee members, all volunteers of all kinds. You have built something amazing here. You have set us up perfectly to go forth in this new chapter, Ledor Vador, from generation to generation. It is my foremost objective in my new role this year to build a culture of continuity amidst all of this change. I intend to show all the ways that our Jewish point at the center of our community remains the same and it continues to shine bright. And I will make sure that our light reaches you, wherever you are. I hope to increase our social media presence. We will send clips of sermons, create podcasts, and find ways to make sure that you can access content that reaches your Jewish point. In these months, we have been worried sick about the hostages, about those defending Israel, about the people of Israel who are displaced and under attack, and about all who are suffering in that region. And in this time of challenge, I have been dreaming. I've been dreaming of creating a center for Israel engagement and experience here at Beth Or. This community has been and will always be a Zionist congregation, a congregation that believes in the Jewish people's right to self-determination in the land of Israel. And while I can talk about Israel until I'm blue in the face, the reality is that people need to experience Israel to fully understand it. Zionism is a word that is so often weaponized and misunderstood. The reality is that there are many ways to be a Zionist. It is not a binary choice, as so many folks would have us think. I am very well aware that in this congregation we have varying opinions about what is happening in Israel and the Middle East. Many of you have honored me by trusting in me enough to share your feelings. I want to share with you today that Zionism is a hope rooted in over 2,000 years of history, and in its current 150-year-old iteration, it's nothing short of a miracle. Israel itself is deeply divided right now, so it should come as no surprise that we too have varying perspectives. Remember that before this war, Israel saw 39 weeks of intense demonstrations by hundreds of thousands of people against judicial reforms, and those are the same judicial reforms that many other Israelis were in favor of. And now, nearly a year after October 7th, 2023, Israel is still divided over a different set of questions, but still very divided. Whatever your feelings may be on current events, if you feel a deep connection to the Jewish people, if that Jewish point within you is aglow right now with pride and pain and sorrow, if you have a deep conviction that the Jewish people have the right to live securely in the land of Israel, then at your core, at your Pinta Yid, the Jewish point within, you are a Zionist. In the same way that I hope to serve as a guide for people to discover the kind of Judaism that works for them, I similarly hope to help you explore your relationship and connection to the state of Israel, which is, in my opinion, the greatest miracle of the Jewish people of the last 2,000 years. I hope to help you build your connection to that miracle, and I hope that our bond with Israel will help to create a safer, more secure Israel. I hope that our relationship with Israel will help to ensure that the state of Israel remains diverse and democratic. This is why I've been dreaming of an Israel Experience Center here at Beth Or that leverages state-of-the-art technology that would make coming to Beth Or the next best thing to hopping on a plane and going to Israel. I imagine having the ability to run immersive Hebrew courses, take 3D tours of Israeli cities, meet people online who are working to make Israeli society better. But on this Rosh Hashanah, as we hear the call of the shofar, an instrument created long before 3D goggles and computers, I want to remind you that we already hold the key to that connection. Connection with Israel, connection to each other, and connection to your Jewish point within. We have that all here at Beth Or. The Shema is not only a prayer. It is an ancient key which unlocks the Jewish point within. It is a promise to the generations that came before us. And the ancient rabbis of old wrote a legend to explain how that came to be. The legend says that as Jacob, who, by the way, acquired the name Israel while wrestling an angel, while Jacob was on his deathbed, he was about to offer prophecies and blessings to his children, but suddenly a great dread came over him, and he completely lost his connection to the divine. Jacob, unable to see the future, anxiously asked his children, "What will become of you when I'm gone? What will become of you when I pass away?" That question resonates so deeply with me right now. Who among us is not worried about the next generation of Jewish children in a world like this? The legend says that Jacob's children, with tears in their eyes at the foot of their father's deathbed, they answered that question with the following words: Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Listen, Israel, Jacob, Dad, the Lord is our God. The Lord is one. Upon hearing this, Jacob felt an overwhelming sense of relief. And the story says that with his very last breaths, he said, Baruch Shem Kevod, Malchuto Leolam Va'ed. Blessed is the name of God's glorious kingdom, forever and ever. To say the words of the Shema as we have today, beautifully and fully and strongly, as we've said those words, we know and we affirm that it is not only a tradition, it is an act of solidarity, and it is a promise. It is a promise to the Israelis who were murdered by Hamas terrorists in cold blood on October 7th. It is a promise to the hostages subsequently murdered this year. It is a promise to the hostages still alive in Gaza as I speak these words. May they come home soon and safely. It is a promise to those like Ro'i Shalev who survived those attacks. And it is a promise to those children in that orphanage in Europe. When we say the Shema, it is a promise to you, the builders of our congregation, Beth Or. And it is a promise to the next generation of Beth Or students and families, including the 52 kindergartners in our religious school this year, our largest religious school kindergarten class ever. When we say the Shema, we make a promise that we will continue to shine. Shema Yisrael, listen, people of Israel, here in this sanctuary, across the world and across the generations. We will heal together, we will build together, we will listen together, for we are all connected by that Jewish point within. Shana Tova.